Thank you for buying Henson's Flying Machines Spitfire balsa kit. The kit comes on 6 laser cut panels. In order to find the parts on the panels, you will need the parts list, which is diagrammed like so. To build the kit, you will need a pencil, a scalpel or craft knife, super glue or balsa cement, and any 90-degree corner edge that you're short of. Let's begin. Start by marking the panels with a pencil using the numbering on the parts list provided. As you'll see, each part corresponds to the sheet layout on the parts list. Mark them with a pencil so that it can be rubbed off, and then begin to cut them out. To remove the parts using a sharp scalpel, gently cut the connections where the wood and the part are held together. Once these are cut, you can easily lift out the sections and lay to the side. Begin with fuselage sides 1A and 1B. These form the main strength of the fuselage. You'll then also need part 2A and 3A, the lower wing brace. Part 2A fits into the bottom of the fuselage and the top of the fuselage here with this slot. Right, so using your 90-degree edge, check that it's correct and sitting flush. When you're happy with how it's sitting, use a touch of super glue where the two pieces of balsa meet, and before it dries, check with your 90-degree edge. Hold until firm. Part 3A, the lower wing support, goes into the forward slot here, just front of part 2A. Now, the bottom of it fits flush against the bottom of the fuselage there. Again, using your 90-degree angle, check that it is in fact 90 degrees. Sometimes a little bit of blue tack can help hold things in place while you're gluing. Make sure that it's flush to the bottom, as it can go a little higher. Touch of super glue. And while it's still drying, double check that 90 degree. When you're happy that that's fitting, you can move on to part 1B, the other side of the fuselage, and just dry fit that in to check the alignment before gluing it up. Once again, from the bottom, check a 90 degree, and then touch with super glue. You can also reinforce the bonds on the other side, and don't forget to do the top notch. Wherever super glue touches balsa, it will make it a bit stronger. So any areas that you can perceive as being a little weak, like here, a touch of super glue will give it extra strength. Part 4A forms the base of the nose cone, the engine cowling front. That fits with these small tabs just here onto the nose cone. You can see when it's seated correctly, it will form a bridge. Once you're happy with it, glue along the inside and also where the tabs connect to the wood. You'll see now the curvature of the nose and the form is for the underside. Next is part 5A, which sits behind the cockpit and begins to build up the tail section in these slots here. Tabs should slot directly in. Now, when aligning it, make sure that the bottom, as the curve comes in, is flush to the fuselage and that it is fairly vertical. It doesn't have to be exact. And then glue on the inside, both sides, holding it tight. Make sure there's no gap along the edges, and then reinforce the tabs from the outside. Part 5B is further down the tail, a cross section. Fits into these two tabs like this. Again, you want to align it towards the bottom, in this case as low down as possible, and as straight as possible. As you can see, the fuselage will have a slight flex in it now. You need to align those straight, so feel free to use the table as a guide or eyeball it, and then glue along the seams when you're happy with the fit. Don't forget to reinforce the tabs, and before you cover the model you can go through and just dab a little reinforcement on all of those areas. Part 6A is the instrument cluster, which fits angled forwards here into these two angled slots at the front of the fuselage. It lays simply like that. As you can see, dry fitting it. It should come in at about a 45-degree angle. Hold it in place, glue the tabs, and let it dry. Parts 9A, B, C and D are formers that help create the shape of the fuselage nose. Part 9A fits behind these two slots here. These slots are provided for a later conversion kit that we're going to provide. For now, fit part 9A just behind the two slots so that the holes are in line with the davits in the instrument cluster. You should be able to see that it creates a line straight away through on all of the davits. They're going to hold the shapes for the nose and the stringers. Once you're happy with how it's fitting, carefully glue it in place like so. Laying the fuselage to the side for now, let's begin creating the tail section. You'll need part 10A, 12A and 11A and B. These form the strengtheners of the tail. On part 10A you will see that there are two stepped davits. Part 12A fits like so into the lower of these davits and pushes forward to a line like so. If there is any difficulty sliding on part 12A, you may need to sand the inside edge here or give it a light trim, as it's supposed to be a snug fit. Slide it on, up flush, then take part 11A and aligning it underneath with the slope facing downwards towards the tail wheel and this flush here. Make sure that you don't push the flat cross section out of alignment and just glue gently in place and onto the tail wheel. Then turn it over, repeat the process, checking that they are parallel to each other. There is room for a little bit of movement here. and of course glue it bottom, middle, then glue it to the horizontal 12A. That will give the whole structure tail strength. Part 13A forms the horizontal tail plane. That slots into the upper davit here. Again, you may need to slightly trim or sand the inside here to slide on. It's meant to be snug. Don't sand it too much. Slide it all the way back and make sure that it's fitting firmly against support there. Then glue along the inside. Should also be able to judge that it is at 90 degrees exactly. Taking your fuselage, slightly spread the ends of the fuselage apart and slot inside here. As you can see, the support section for the fuselage sits slightly proud there. Now, when it comes to aligning this, the actual length of the tail is fairly variable, and it will sit just under that support beam there and in line with the end of parts 11A and 11B. That should sit up flush on both sides, and the front of part 13A should slightly overlap but be in line with the ends of the fuselage. Like so. It does take a little fiddling to get it exactly right, and you can make it slightly longer or slightly shorter, but a fairly good alignment with 11A will give you the most strength. Also make sure it's sat down flush, and then glue the inside of these circles, connecting the fuselage to 11A and B, and same again on the other side. Allow that to set, then glue the bulk of the tail sections together, give it more strength, again gluing the tail support to sides of the fuselage. To start building the bottom of the fuselage, take part 7A and with 2 slots facing forward, lay it into the crease at the bottom of the fuselage. Now this needs to sit flush on both sides, as this will support the wings. Glue along the outside edges and along the inside where it touches up the lower wing support spar. Making sure to keep them flush on each side. Now this needs to be quite a strong bond, as it will be load bearing. To begin building the lower nose section, you will need part 17A and 18A and B. Begin by gluing these like so on the inside of that T, with the lower section facing down and that notch going in. Just use a touch of super glue on there. Same on the other side with 18B. Now, let this dry fully, because you're going to begin the delicate process of bending this into place. Allow it to dry first. Once you've built the nose section, take the front of the fuselage upside down and carefully place the top of the T over the bottom of the fuselage with the bottom of slots 18, A and B touching the inside of the nose cone. Glue those sections in place, touch super glue, and glue the top of this T section to where it meets the underside of the fuselage. Make sure you have a strong bottom on there. Then the next stage is going to be to bend down the bottom of the T into alignment of the slot on the nose creation part. Now you're going to need to glue on the inside here and then carefully bend this piece in and flex the end slightly downwards to give the correct angle. Now, once that's dry, I'm just going to use a knife, trim this edge here, give it the right look. Make sure that you do this accurately. You can, of course, sand it down later, but it's always best to get it right the first time. Once you're happy with the fitment here, take part 31A, which is the next step in building up the nose. Align it according to the hole here and to the center, and so that it will cover the end of these davits here. Once you're happy with it, a good ring of glue the whole way around to give it strength. Of course, along the bottom section, make sure that this is now flush, and then align and stick. The next part is part 32A. Align it on the nose with the flatter edge upwards and using the cutout in the middle, position it as central as possible, and then glue on the inside edges and around the edges as well. Next, parts 32B and C, these two halves here. Make them correctly, make sure they're the right way round. A little bit of super glue on the seam, edges are lined up, then transfer it onto the nose, align it centrally and straight. Don't worry about the cutout in the middle, that will all be hidden, and then glue from the inside and on the bottom. You should have a little bit of space all the way around with the nose power bulges. Repeat the process for parts 35A and B, again aligning them, gluing the joint, placing it on the model with the rectangles aligned. You should be on both sides equidistance. Don't worry if it's slightly off, as you can sand all of this down later to get that perfect round to it. Glue on the inside and move on to the next section. Continuing in the same vein, use 34AB, which is distinguished by these small holes in the side. Glue seams and attach using a rectangle in the middle for alignment. You should now be getting a decent profile of the nose build up. Don't forget to reinforce by gluing on the outside edges and the inside of the rectangle. The last two of these cutaway formers, 35A and B, smallest of them, put together in the same way as all of the others. Glue along the seams, make sure they're buttered up flush, lay over the rectangle, aligning top to bottom, and then visually to cover the holes at the side, and glue along the edges and to the inside of the rectangle. Don't forget this nose is built to be strong, take an impact of landing or to fit your motor. The next part is 36A, which is the flat circle, the larger of the two pieces. Fits over the end there, as central as possible. Glues around the outside. As many spots as possible. Then your final piece, 37A, align it with the hole in the center. That's going to be your shaft hole. Glue around the outside. When this is all dry, you can smooth the nose, but you can see you've got a significant wedge of wood there to give it strength. In case of any hard landings or to take any motor weight or rubber weight. Nose, you'll need another part 9B, which fits just behind these slots here. Should fit in parallel with the bottom of the slots, and just behind, make sure that it is aligned well and perfectly upright. Then glue on the inside where the former meets the fuselage. To complete the nose, you'll need parts 16A, B and C, which are these shapes. Lay this with the little davit against part 9B into the top slots. When ready, slightly trim the front end to fit into the receiving hole in the nose, like so. Depending on the placement of 9A, you may not need to trim it. Push down into the gaps on the top, and when you're happy with the fitment, glue it starting at the nose, then into the davit here, and the davit further along. Bend it down where necessary and glue here just at the beginning of the cockpit. Reinforce the edges. Then start with 16B. Repeat the process, dry fitting it first. Again, this doesn't need to be trimmed, you can just push it in. Make sure that it fits flushly into the top of 9B. Glue from the nose, back along, and as you can see here, it should fit into the top of the cockpit detail. Glue it in place there. Repeat the process on the other side. For 16C. As you can see, these are angled slightly inwards. This gives it a little bit more strength in flight. The amount of angle is entirely up to you, but it looks a lot better if you keep it the same and uniform on both sides. From the front to the instrument panel. Once that's dry, just using your straight edge knife in line with the instrument panel, carefully trim away any excess on the outer two. If you have any damage, you can of course just pull it back together, and at this stage a bit of super glue will hide any mistakes. Now with the central part here, the top of the instrument panel needs to be flush against 9A, so trim that against 9A here. Cutting in and lifting away. As you can see there, that's slightly shorter than B and C, so that you can eventually fit the cockpit front section into there. The stringers for the rear of the fuselage are 24A, B and C. Start with the central one and butt it up against the tail section like so, letting it sit in the top of the davits. Begin from the tail by gluing it securely to the tail section here. Make sure that's a strong bond, then moving forward, glue it to these cross sections. For 16B, the side section sit like so. That will align against the tail plane. Glue it firstly here, then to the rear of the cockpit, and then to the tail plane itself. Repeat the process on the other side. Always dry fit first to make sure you're happy with the fit, as balsa is very flexible. And the tail. Once you're happy with that, let it dry and carefully, using the back of the cockpit as a guide, slowly trim off the excess. Once that's done, just smooth it from the inside. This can be done either with your blade or by sanding it with a file or sandpaper. Now you can see the fuselage is taking on that distinctive Spitfire shape. Laying the semi-completed fuselage to one side for now, it's time to start building up the wing sections. You'll need part 19A front edge, 20A and 21B being this detachable flap. As you can see, I've left it attached. This is if you want to do a conversion later. You can trim the ailerons and make it flexible, put a hinge in. I'm not going to, so I'm going to just dab a little bit of super glue, hold it in place. Make sure you don't stick it to the table at this point. Keep moving. Now your front edge 19A will fit directly in using these plug guides here. Now align that so the two inside edges are straight, and again glue front edge and these trailing guides. Make sure you have a very nice firm bond on it. There are several profiles to the wings: the 2-hole profile, the 3-hole profile, and the elongated 2-lobe profile. The one you want to start with is the outer one, which has these 2 circular holes in. That creates your wingtip strength here. Now you want to align it as far back as possible for that front edge there, and straight up against the interior rectangle. Glue the flap to it and glue along the end. Remember, your wingtips do tend to hit in an impact, so make sure that this is a strong bond. Moving on from there, start with your 3 holes, which is the 2 oblong holes and a small circular hole. that is going to go on your inner edge. Again, align it slightly to the front. You can see it will go all the way along the support. Glue it in place. Again, the strongest bond you can get on this front, as it will take a lot of the wing strength. Now the next part you're going to need is 23 A or B, which are the main wing spars. Now you're not going to glue this in place yet, just settle it into the davits on the top of the wing profiles. That will act as a guide for you to put in all of the profiles along. Your next part is going to be another 3, and if you see the cutout here in the rectangle, that will act as a guide, and align that slightly forward. Using that as a guide, you can of course check that it is 90 degrees to the rectangular cutout at the front. Make sure that it is sitting flush with the wing spar. Glue to the rear and to the front once you're happy. Next is another 3-hole. There are 3 of the 3 holes on each wing. Position that 2 spaces inwards. Align it. Check it with the wing spar. That slightly forward there. Don't forget that your wing spar will take a lot of the strain and also help to give shape to the wing once covered. And your last 3-hole one is in the middle of those 2. As you can see from this, the spacing is 2 of the spaces. These spaces are actually in to reduce the main weight of the wing, and it also gives it a fantastic look if uncovered or shining the sunlight through it. The next parts to go in are the 2 oblong holes. Now there are 3 of these to each wing side, so what you want to do is dry fit them spaced as you want them. Even looks best. Use the wing spar as a guide, and then space them out according to what looks best for you. Don't forget, if you are going to be converting it to micro RC, you're going to need to trim these to give space for the flap to move upwards. Once you're happy with that, glue them in place. Also glue it to this flap. That will give a lot more strength to the flap in the air. Now for now, do not glue in the main spar. Leave that loose. Now you have to repeat the entire process for the other wing, but make sure that everything is reversed. As these are 2D parts, you can very easily accidentally build the same wing, which would be utterly pointless. It's better to keep your part on the cutting table, and when you're laying out the second wing surface, just use it as a guide so that you are definitely building the opposite wing. Once you have both of the wings complete, checking that they're opposite and aligned, it's time to start fitting them to the fuselage. You can now see that characteristic Spitfire shape starting to take place. So start out for positioning. You will see that that wing spar hole is going to align directly into the hole in the side of the fuselage. Also, the braces, formers coming from the side of the fuselage, are going to give your wings the angle. So carefully lay in 32B the wing strut, put it in place, and then push the wing stringer forward until aligned with the hole. Now very carefully turn the aircraft upside down, push the wing into place, and just touch glue where the wing connects to the fuselage, making sure that it's flat, and then glue on the inside here where the wing supports come through. Then the next step will be to glue in the wing support beam into the small hole here. As you can see, it should butt up very much to where the end of the profiles are, while still just fitting inside. Glue into the fuselage first, allow that to set, lay your fuselage down, sometimes helps to put a wedge underneath, then pressing into the profiles, glue it in place flush with the top. Remember that any mistakes at this point will show up in the covering, and then it needs a certain amount of strength, especially on the wing tip, so make sure that's a good solid seal the whole way around. Now, once that's dry, you'll see from the end you've got that classic Spitfire shape, but it will also help it self-level in flight. Now, I want to repeat the process on the other side. Again, aligning that central stringer. You can, if you want, glue the support beams first. As with the other wing in place, you already have it set where it wants to be. Make sure the spar's correct. And don't forget to glue the seal on the other side. The next parts of the wing are 36A and B, which form the fuselage connection here, like so. Now, there will have been a little bit of differential in putting your fuselage together and attaching a wing, so do this by sight and by eye, but make sure it fits nicely to the wing and along the edge of the fuselage. You can glue it to the wing first, like so. Make sure it's flush. And you should be able to just incline it upwards to meet the bottom of the fuselage tail section. Run some glue along there, and repeat the process on the other side. Now that we've finished wing sections, we can start building up some of the shapes and the curved sides of the Spitfire. Parts 26A and B are now ready to fit. You'll notice one end is slightly longer and one end is slightly shorter. So position the slightly shorter end facing forwards. It goes on the top of the cut out rectangle into the slot. Make sure it's butted up firmly to the top and glue along the edges. These shapes also lend a lot of strength above the wing section and to the side of the nacelle. And just put the other one in the same way on the opposite side. Make sure again the right end is positioned the right way. Like so. The next parts you're going to need are 27A and B, which are almost the same but have this circular cutout to mark them. Again, short end towards the front and long end towards the back, and that's going to go on the bottom of the rectangular cutout. glue it in place from the top. Then put the model upside down and glue underneath just for strength. As you can see, that's starting to build up the shape. Repeat on the other side. Make sure it's down firmly. This turns your 2D into a 3D. The final contour of the sides are 29A and B and 28A and B. The smaller parts form the taper of the tail and go into this irregularly shaped hole here. You want to align these perfectly in the middle with that V section there and straight on to the fuselage. So get it in place and then just touch a little glue onto it there. Now part 28, a forward part, is going to fit in line with that there. As you can see, you need to line it up based on the alignment of there, as a strip is going to run between the two. So once you're happy with it, hold it in place, glue where it meets the wood, firmly down, and then allow it to dry. To finish the side profile, you need parts 30A and B, which are these small stringers. They are going to fit from that profile to that profile. As you can see, they're obviously quite long. So what I'm going to do is just trim them a little bit and then start off from one end glue to the larger slot here. Make sure that you have aligned it perfectly front to rear. Starting from the rear, just allow it to flush into space there and glue up firmly, and using your blade very gently trim away so that you're going to get a smooth fit. You can also just angle it a little bit, glue it to that section there and smooth it into one continuous profile. At this stage, now that you've finished the sides, there's only the accessories and the tailplane to go on. If you want to sand down the nose to give it a smooth effect, this would be the time to do it. Either use some folded sandpaper, or in this case a nail file, and just gently curve off the balsa part so that when you do cover it, you will get a better texture. I'm only going to do it very lightly, going with the stress lines of the model. And it's up to you how much you want to sand it down. Right, as you can see, I have sanded down some of the nose, just to make it a bit smoother. Make sure that when you are sanding down, both sides sanded to the same level and smooth to touch. You can also go over all the sections of the fuselage very carefully. Just strip away any extra bits, smooth off any parts you want. When you do come to covering, you will see these side panels unless you just pull the edges off, smooth it out. But again, how much smoothing you do is entirely up to you. Be very careful not to break any parts at this point. once you're happy with it, we can move on to fitting the tail planes. The upright of the tail section is part 15A. Now, if you wanted to, you can either use a plastic hinge or just a simple paper hinge. In this case, as we're going for display and free fight, I'm going to put it in place and then just glue it where we want it. There we go. And the horizontal tail planes are 14A and B, should fit here. As you can see, they have been pre-drilled, so if you wanted you could loop a bit of thread through, or of course attach plastic or paper hinges. Again, I'm not going to, I'm going to glue it in place just along the seam and on the other side. As you can see now, our Spitfire is looking almost complete with a very distinctive tail and wing shape. Now, the only parts left to fit are the details such as the landing gear, cockpit parts, exhaust. There is a servo tray which can be fitted inside of the cockpit. You will need to trim it a little bit, but we're not going to do that today. Right, to put the details into the cockpit, start with 30A, which is this little roll cage type device. That slots straight here into the middle of the cockpit. It can be glued on the edges. Now, as this is quite a weak part, if you want to make it stronger, you can run super glue along the edges. That will soak into it and give it a lot more strength. Part 44A forms the front of the cockpit and will sit, as you can see, just so. Now, this needs to be angled according to judgment. Make sure it's central. Tilt it back slightly towards the roll cage. Make sure it's flush up to the front and glue in place. Right, for some further details, the exhaust manifolds here fit on the top of these profiles here. Now they're curved to fit these profiles. You move it and adjust it where you want it. If you want it more forward, that's fine. Central, more to the rear. In the Spitfire it should sit about here with the holes further back. Now if you're going to cover it, don't do this yet, as it will be incredibly difficult to cover it with it, but just hold it in place, touch with super glue and leave. The other details you can put on, which it's better to put on after you've covered, if you're going to, is the wing cannons. Are these small parts here which fit directly into the small davits in the front of the wings. Again, if you're going to cover it first and put the rectangular square sticker over the gun ports, then glue them in place. You can paint them black if you want to. To start assembling the landing gear, you need 39A and 40A. Now, as you can see from the profile, that will fit straight into that slot there. Align it perfectly with the top edge at right angles and glue along for strength. Now you'll see that that forms a T-shape which fits directly into the bottom of the fuselage here. Now the shape of the wings will angle it slightly outwards. Glue it in place, but of course if you're covering it, cover it, then cut out the section, glue it in place, and you can also cover the outside of this or paint the inside support strut. And that completes the Spitfire build. Thank you for buying Henson's Flying Machine Spitfire.